Good morning and welcome to How Web Visitors Digest Complex Web Information. I am Laura S. Quinn. I am an independent consultant. I do coaching and advising. So I help people who are doing projects, whether content projects, web strategy projects, to think through what makes sense for them with very discrete hourly coaching. So perhaps once a week, twice a month, that type of thing. So what are we talking about today? So we're going to start by thinking specifically about how visitors think about complex information online and how you would know what your visitors are thinking about. And then slightly more detailed, how do they read online? Because those are very linked to search engines, we're going to talk a little bit about how they find pages through search engines. And then we're going to wrap it up a little bit with some concepts to write to support people with disabilities, which in fact in this particular area are very overlapping, which is very exciting. So by doing a lot of the general best practices, you can also better support particularly those who are blind. All right, I'm going to be running through. So this is, I think you probably saw, this is a 30-minute webinar. So this is kind of a neutron star of information. I'm going to be running through a bunch of information. You will get the slides, indeed, as well as the recording. Just wanted to say that I'm not making this stuff up. This stuff is based on research from a whole bunch of different disciplines. So academic disciplines like human factors, information architecture, website user information, best practices in user testing, particularly from legal information sites, which have been around for a while, and I've been quite involved in that space. And then an even more mature space, medical sites. So medical sites have been giving out lots of information for lots of years in very easy to read ways. So, and I myself have been working with pretty information dense sites for about 25 years. So this is my picture over here this is the if you want to think about how pages come together and how people structure blocks of information in their minds, this is the grandfather of all books about it. It's currently in its fourth edition. So this was published maybe like 20 years ago and has been updated ever since. All right, let's think about how visitors think. How do they think about complex information? So the first thing to definitely start with is they don't think the same way as your subject matter experts. So a lot of us are working with medical experts, with climate scientists, with lawyers, with, all sorts of different discipline experts. And they've gone through a whole lot of training and schooling to know how to think the way they think. And that gives them essentially a disability to think the way that visitors think often. It is often harder for them to think the way that somebody who does not have that subject matter expertise thinks. So they don't separate things into the same category. So your visitors do not separate things into the same categories as your subject matter experts likely do. Your visitors are focused on specific questions. So they don't tend to have a subject matter expert tends to want to set a lot of background and to divide things into different kind of decision tree-like things so visitors can understand. Visitors sometimes want to understand, but more likely they just want to know the answer to a question. They want to know what to do next. So here, for instance, on the right is an example of, so this particular diagram I pulled, it's actually directed at clinicians. So this is heart disease types and symptoms directed at clinicians. Here's symptoms of heart disease. The blood to the heart becomes narrow. The valves are not working well. The heart walls become thicker and large. This is a totally non-useful way for anybody other but that clinicians to separate these or think about this. If I'm thinking about heart disease symptoms, I'm probably thinking, am I about to have a heart attack? Or should I go to a doctor? Like, I've got very specific symptoms. I got very specific questions. Another very typical example of this in the legal aid space is questions about eviction. Like, so someone hasn't paid their rent, has a notice on their door saying that there's a court hearing. They want to know, am I going to get evicted? And what lawyers want to tell them is, well, it depends. You should go to the hearing. There's possible ways to fight your hearing. And all of those things are true, but probably most true is if you haven't paid your rent well, number one, you should pay your rent right now if you can. But number two, if you can't pay your rent, you're probably going to be evicted. You're probably not going to be able to make a defense. So you probably should start to think about what your options are. It doesn't actually do a lot of good to tell people, okay, here are your possible defenses if only 5% of people who have that notice are ever going to be able to effectively defend themselves. All right. How do you know what questions they're asking? By the way, I am pretty good at looking at the questions while I'm talking, so please go ahead, or Pat said amen. Go ahead and put your questions or your comments in the chat, and I will answer them as I can. Though we do have a great turnout today, 40 people on the line, so I may or may not be able to get all of those. So how do you know what questions they're asking? So this is an area which overlaps really interestingly with what search engine optimization tools can tell you. So online tools that are intended to help people figure out search engine keywords can really be helpful here. So there's this keyword magic tool. This is, I believe, Moz, M-O-Z. There's a lot of similar ones. Another one is Answer the Public. So that basically I can say, all right, for people filing for divorce, what are the types of words that they might actually be using as they are thinking about this? So no fault, divorced, child support is an interesting one. Dissolution, actually, this is a good one to do the other way around, like to say dissolution of divorce. What is that? What do actually people search for that gets them to those pages? So it helps you help understand what visitors are searching for, understand what words are related to each other in their mind. And so certainly no shock that child support is related to divorce, but thinking that you might not have thought immediately that those you are going to link out from one to another. And also, big upside, it helps you to help them find the sites through search engines. How does a visitor evaluate your page? Okay, so great news, you're using words that your visitor uses. They found it through a search engine. The top of the page needs to convince them it will answer their specific question or they will leave. So if I am looking for child support, for instance, and I get to this page, then this is questionable. I don't know, this seems like a general divorce page. So even if it does have at the bottom of this page a bunch of answers about child support, I may well leave this page too soon before I get there. So this would be probably not a reason to give it a more specific or a more general title, but a reason to have a lot of specific pages that are going to make sure that the person who's looking for child support information gets to a page that is clearly about child support at the top. So if there's too much information without white space and clear headings, then they may well just leave. So if this was basically family and safety and then like a little bold thing and then a whole bunch of text, they might just be like, run away. So we'll talk more about this and why this is. But it's really important to think about the initial impression your page makes on a visitor. And thinking about, they're busy and they may be in crisis. A lot of us work in human services and people may be looking for information that is immediately, they want to immediately use. And they're in, maybe a busy place. They're on their phone on break in, the back of a bar. They're, it's not optimal circumstances. So stuff like illustrations and empathetic text do help. They can help to kind of ground them. So a big thing that will help them if they're busy to keep them from jumping away is to make sure that your page doesn't look like it's in some random order. So if it's not easy to find their answer in a list of things that appears to be in no order, like here's a good example of a list of things that appears to be in new order. Even if everybody understood that these pluses meant that you could open them up, which they won't, it's a long list with no headers, and it's kind of like, whoa, that's a lot. So what order is likely to make sense? So step by step is always best if you can say this happens first and then this happens second. So things that happen in a time order. That's obviously not always possible. More specific information to more specific. Sorry, more general information to more specific. Or think about if you've got a ton of information, having a short list with maybe 3 or 6 elements with easy, with quick blurbs that are linked to more information. So basically, take a first level pass to help people understand which of these 3 to 6 elements they want to continue further down with, and then get them further in. So this is actually relating to somebody's question about, or someone had a specific thing about page depth. And there's page depth, and relating with that is kind of click depth, is how many clicks should you, there's kind of the idea that you should have everything in just 2 or 3 clicks, which would imply that you might have really, really long pages. So neither of those things are true or hard and fast. So people will scroll really long pages if it is clear where they're going and that there are things at the bottom that might be of use. They may not get to the bottom if it's not clear there's things there. They will click through a bunch of pages, like 4 or 5 different links, if it's clear where they're going. If it's basically obvious, oh, I click here and then, oh, this is clearly what I want. And oh, I'm clearly going here. It doesn't bother them at all to click. So clarity is the name of the game. So you could do short pages with a lot of clicks. You could do longer pages that are clear. Probably you're going to end up with some combination of both with some careful interlinking. How do they read online? Well, for the most part, they don't. They scan. So this is a heat map. So this is showing in an eye tracking experiment, literally where people's eyes go on a page. So they look at the top of the page, they scan for headers, bold links, images. This is an image down here. It draws the eye. As I just said, they're willing to scroll. as long as it's clear. And as soon as you get to a big block of text, you can see all of this stuff here on the right that basically nobody looked at. Like they're just not reading it. So they would have to really be interested to get over there. So to support visitor scanning, this is obviously too small to read. But the idea here is you've got a page title and a short opening to confirm that they're on the right page. And you've got headers. So look at all these big headers on short sections. So the sections could be somewhat longer if there were other headers, which there are. You'll sometimes see in user testing behavior, users will literally scroll all the way down the page, all the way up the page before they do anything. Like they're kind of just getting the lay of the land. So headers are great for that. Sections are one or a few short paragraphs. You hardly ever need to worry about having too little in a section. Like here is a section that only has like 2 sentences in it. Bullet points are always your friend, or numbered. Or numbers are even better. If you can make a numbered list, absolutely do that. Bullet points, anything that you can make bullet pointed or numbered, make bullet pointed or numbered. If something's important, set it as a pull quote or bold. Like this doesn't have anything set off, but this could have like a little box here that says, you know, important, make sure you, this is a legal thing. Make sure you file this at least 10 days in advance. And consider hiding things that are less important under an accordion. Someone actually asked about kind of drop downs or accordions at the beginning. You should assume that some people will not see things that are in accordions. So they are, let me just, sorry, let me define accordion before I just, so an accordion is this type of thing. So if I click plus here, it will open up and it will show more text. And you've probably, most of you on the call have seen that behavior. Not everybody in the world knows that behavior, especially as you get to older people. So not everybody will know how to use that. And in fact, on a mobile device, you need to really think about, okay, is my click big enough to let it be usable? All of that type of thing. I don't love accordions as just the way that one does a site. Like people sometimes just have everything in accordions. To me, they are good for essentially having some, you know, like 3 to 4 additional things at the bottom of the page that are really quite obscure, but you want to include them somewhere. They might as well be links to another page, but maybe they're so short they would be kind of strange on another page. Also, got a question as to what a pull quote is. A pull quote, I'm going to have a page with a pull quote. A pull quote is simply you have formatted something in a way to catch the eye. So it comes from a magazine type layout where you can imagine in the middle of a magazine, literally a magazine, print magazine, there is a piece of a quote from somebody pulled out into big bold font in quotes. So to do that same type of thing, to format it so that people can easily see that it's important. Low-income visitors, if that's who you are targeting, are overwhelmingly on mobile. And in fact, most sites, unless you are specifically targeting people who are in offices, are probably at least 50% coming in on mobile. So this just makes it even more important to make the page scannable. They will indeed scan all the way down the page. They will scroll down. This makes PDFs, so PDFs are kind of the bane of any information-heavy site. They there's a lot of things that are wrong with them, but I think the most useful thing to say that is wrong with them is for anyone who is on mobile, this is their experience. This is a normal sized phone. I am reading this. I get to this link. I click on it. It opens this weird thing on most phones it wants me to pick what application I'm going to use to view this PDF, but most people don't know that unless they open a lot of PDFs. And then you get this thing which is totally unreadable, and it's pretty usually formatted in a way which is totally unreadable. So the only thing you can really do with it is print it. But how many people do you know who have their mobile phones hooked up to a printer? I mean, I do, but that's not many people. So you should absolutely 100% be trying to get all your information that you have online out of PDFs and into web pages. Many other good reasons for that. All right, so we're moving quickly into helping visitors find pages through search engines. It's because we've already talked about using the words that the questions that people want answers to, and finding that. And the idea that people are going to find your pages through search engines, it seemed a shame not to go through to talk about another couple things that will really help you out as you are optimizing your site. So typically, visitors are searching in keywords. And keywords are not necessarily the words your subject matter experts use. So you want to think about what those are. So get custody of my child, for instance. And just briefly, this blurb on the top of the page, and so since I've taken a screenshot, and the AI blurb, as well as this stuff, is all taken from pretty much the same search engine results. So we should use the keywords to include everyday words and have those in titles, headings, and summaries. So basically, take everyday keywords that people are using and put them in your headers and your summaries and your titles. And articles that simply use those keywords or things that Google feels are conceptually similar multiple times rate higher. So just a level down here, although the article on the right so while I talk through this is the article on the right is an example of going overboard. So you want to use plain language terms almost exclusively. So specialized terms, so like for instance, if the terms that people will need to know to go to court, or the specialized terms about the climate science, you only should use them if somebody's going to take that climate science term and use it in a hearing, then they need it. But otherwise, they don't need it at all. In a law article, they might need it to understand down the road, but you don't want to define a specialized term and then switch to it for the whole article, because you're then taking out the uses of that keyword. You want to use different terms rather than trying to standardize, which is sometimes not intuitive. So you don't want to, for instance, say home everywhere, but instead say apartment in one place and condo in another and house in another, and so etc., to get those keywords in there. But this page is ridiculous. So it's an example of how you can do this. So this has mother, father, custody, dads, moms, in headers and titles, which is good, but it's just all over the place. And it just, when you try to read it, it sounds completely odd. It's done just for SEO. And that will actually penalize you if you do that to this degree. To the question, has anyone else found that that Google's AI overviews are negatively impacting traffic because people don't click through? People are of mixed minds about this. Yes, so some of the people don't click through, but some of the people specifically click on the citations that are at the bottom of the AI if you open it. So it is finding that it actually does better for people who are like a page in on search results. Like it's moving pages that were deeper up onto the top page. But it is, if you were already first, it may well be bringing you down. All right, in 2 minutes, thinking about, this is particularly people who are using a screen reader, because this is mostly reinforces all of the things that we've already talked about. So people who are blind or seeing impaired may be using a screen reader. It literally reads the page to them. So basically they'd be hearing link heading level 3 qualifying to get a divorce. So they will often skip through and read only headers, skip through and read only links. So headers need to effectively summarize what's in the section, and links must summarize where they go. So if you just have a bunch of click here, click here, click here, click here, click here, click here, not useful summary for a screen reader. And make sure there's alt text. Alt text is also good for SEO and other things as well. Citations for the I promised a research-based seminar. So here it is. Great. I'm just going to go back to my own. Here I am. I actually neglected to provide a link to my own website. I'm just going to put that in, and I can certainly, we are at time. But I'm certainly happy to stick around and answer questions if you would like to. So this is me. I also have a newsletter which comes out every other week with website tips, which I would love to, which is easily findable on my website. Questions, thoughts? I'm going to turn off the recording, but I will be back in just a second.